Hi, welcome back to another episode of Design for Health, which is a new design and innovation course from the Stanford University School of Medicine. I'm Dr. Larry Chu, one of the course directors, along with Dr. Kyra Bobinette, who can't be with us tonight. I'm very excited to introduce tonight's speakers for April 24th, 2014. And the topic tonight is Doctor as Designer. We have with us one of my very good friends, Dr. Alan Green, who is a professor here at Stanford. He thinks of himself, he is a practicing physician first and foremost, but also is multi-talented, does many different things, including chief medical officer at Scanadu. And we're going to start off with a talk from our 2013 Stanford Medicine X e-patient scholar, Jamia Crockett. It is Jamia's birthday today, so thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time with us today. Jamia is a graduate of the College of William and Mary and holds a master's degree in hospital administration from Virginia Commonwealth University. While making her mark professionally in the healthcare industry and planning for a new life with her soon-to-be husband, Jamia was given the diagnosis of relapsing multiple sclerosis in January 2005. It's something that she didn't really speak about and rarely acknowledged at the time. And Jamia's outlook on life with MS changed in 2008. When she participated in her first MS walk with the support and encouragement of her friends and family. She was amazed to find many people just like her there and living courageously and with purpose. She, while exploring the impact of MS to her previously normal life, has remastered her life as well as a wife, a mother of two busy little boys, and a professional trailblazer, to say the least. Jamia's ultimate strength and calling was realized in 2012 as she embarked on a new path as a national speaker and advocate for MS. And of course, Jamia was one of our 2013 Stanford Medicine X e-patient scholars. So I can't wait to have Jamia start things off with us tonight. But first, a quick message from me while we get her slide set up. We'll see you on the other side of the break. If you are joining us for the first time, a quick reminder that there is a simultaneous conversation happening on Twitter right now using the hashtag MedX. Jamia Crockett is the in-class moderator for today's program and will be taking questions from social media. So please make sure to start up your Twitter client to join in the online conversation and interact with today's speakers. Christopher Snyder, otherwise known as I Am Spartacus, is moderating the online tweet chat discussion this evening. We also wish to remind you that registration for Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier patient-centered conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our early bird registration pricing is still available until May 1st, 2014. Please also make sure to like our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/StanfordMedX. Please note you are watching a live online program and there is a delay between real-time events and the live stream you are watching. Tweets from our in-class guests will appear before you see the real-time events they are tweeting about
unfold on the video live stream.
Well, thank you all so much for having me on my birthday. I must say that I must have Dr. Chu come with me wherever I go to do announcements because that was awesome. I'm so happy to be here. And what I would like to do, I'm a little bit off the cuff. I'm not really your traditional lecturer. So let's get that out of the way. I'm not traditional at all. So what I would like to do instead is kind of give you all some experiences. I want you all to come with me on this experiential journey. And in order to do that, we're going to have to do a few things, a few ground rules. First of all, we're not professionals. We're going to disrobe our academia. We're going to just be normal people, right? And we're going to kind of focus in on our inner selves, that pure self, that person who you act like you are when you think no one's watching. I want to find that person. I want to tap into that person for a few moments. And so another ground rule is we will close our eyes just for a moment as we kind of go on this journey together. So, are we clear with the ground rules? Those out there in Twitter world, also close your eyes. You can't tweet and close your eyes, but you can definitely listen. So I'm going to ask you all out there in Twitterverse to do that. And those of us who are here, I'm going to ask us now to close our eyes, quiet our minds, and open our hearts as we go on this experiential journey. Imagine a brightly lit hall reflecting warm tones of teal, turquoise, and orange. Imagine glossy floors that encourage quick-paced feet and clinical activity. Imagine the clickety-clack of administrative heels traversing those halls on their way to somewhere important. Imagine warm eyes making contact with visitors, patients, and physicians. This was the hospital where lives were being saved, where there was a sense of order amongst the chaos and the hustle and bustle of codes being called. Everyone in their place, doing their jobs. A well-oiled machine. Healthcare. Now, we're still keeping our eyes closed. Out there in Twitterverse, your eyes are still closed. We're listening. Now, picture this. A brightly lit hall. Almost a little too bright, almost glaring down, cascading an array of institutional colors of teal, turquoise, and orange. Colors that give off the idea of tranquility, but oftentimes ushering in dread and anxiety. The glossy floors don't echo clickety-clack, clickety-clack. They now echo a slow step flap, step flap. Each step harder to take than the previous. Those glossy floors are counting down to the inevitable. For at the end of this hall was a machine that would scan the brain and spinal cord that would then tell the story of a certain disease. There were no warm eyes connecting to visitors, patients, or physicians. Those eyes gave a different gaze. Those eyes gave a gaze of blankness and void. This was a hospital where the most tragic news was handed down by strangers to strangers, where there was no semblance of order amongst codes being called. Someone may have died, or perhaps there was a near miss. Families shaken. Not my child, not my mother, not my wife, husband, father, friend. How could this be? This was the hospital where some lives were being saved, where the hustle and bustle were critical stats situations. Everyone in their place, doing their jobs. A well-oiled machine. Healthcare. Now, I want you all to open your eyes now and let that kind of marinate, right? Kind of this emotional journey. And those scenarios were real, and they were both my scenarios, my experiences. Before I had worked in healthcare. I was the administrator with the clickety-clack heels going to an important business to change processes about how healthcare was going to be delivered to people in our community. And all that time, I'm thinking, this is a great thing I'm doing. This is an endeavor, monumentous. But I realized I'd never been a patient in my own hospital until January of 2005. And that's when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And in that moment, I moved from the administrative side of the hallway, found my patient shoes, put them on, and started that new walk down this long hallway with these bright glaring lights that kind of seemed to glare down at me like, look at her. Something's wrong with her body. Her body has failed her. Whereas just a couple of days before, I was on my way to change processes about how we can deliver better health care. But somehow as a patient, that didn't matter. I didn't see anyone greeting me down the hall to say, hey, Jamia, looks like you're going somewhere. Can I help you get to that MRI machine? No. It was just me doing that slow walk, because at that point I had lost the ability to walk on my left side. So it was a step flat. Didn't have my heels on, had on some flat shoes because I couldn't walk. And so what's interesting about those two dynamics is that at one point I thought healthcare was this glossy, well-oiled machine where things were happening and people's lives were being saved. And then when I became the patient, I saw the cracks in the china. And I realized, those orange and turquoise and teal tones really aren't that warm. They're kind of institutional, and you feel kind of like you're going crazy, going to this place to get this bad news that's going to change your life forever and those around you forever. So I submit that it's time for a do-over. I want to press the little easy button, right, and fix this system. And I can't do it alone. I'm going to need smart people like you in this classroom and you out in the Twitterverse to figure out a way to change the design. And what we'll do is go to another short commercial break with our executive director, Dr. Larry Chu. Thank you.
Time to take another shout out to Twitter. If you are following this conversation online or on Twitter, Christopher Snyder, otherwise known as I Am Spartacus, is moderating the Twitter discussion on the MedX hashtag. If you are just joining us, we have with us today Alan Green, Chief Medical Officer of Scanadu, speaking on the topic Doctor as Designer. E-patients and caregivers out there, what questions do you have for our speaker today? What are some ways you think you might benefit from doctors designing for patients? Healthcare providers, technologists, and researchers out there, what are the real-world problems you are facing that you think might be addressed by a better understanding of how doctors can be part of the design process for healthcare? Tweet us your questions or responses, and we'll do our best to have them addressed during this class in the Stanford University School of Medicine course, Design for Health, for Thursday, April 24th, 2014.
Thank you. So now we'll take a moment to introduce Dr. Alan Green, who is no stranger to changing the conversation in the world of innovative healthcare. Dr. Alan Green is the Chief Medical Officer of Scanadu, the Deputy Editor of the Journal of Participatory Medicine, a practicing pediatrician, and a leading voice in health innovation. He is a graduate of Princeton University and the University of California at San Francisco. In 1995, he launched drgreen.com, cited by the AMA as the pioneer physician website, and was named the Children's Health Hero of the Internet by Intel. Dr. Green is a co-founder of the Society for Participatory Medicine. He is the author of several books, including From First Kicks to First Steps, Raising Baby Green, and Feeding Baby Green. He frequently appears in the media in such venues such as The Today Show, The Dr. Oz Show, Good Morning America, as well as the New York Times. Let's welcome Dr. Alan Green.
And at Stanford Medicine X. I have to say that I believe, for reasons you'll understand in a few minutes, that every medical school needs to have a class in design thinking. And so I want to start with kudos to Larry Chu and the team for being pioneers in that here, and for all of you for being in this class. This is the future of medicine. Driving a cab in London changes your brain in actually physical ways. It changes the amount of gray matter and the part of the brain that stores a lot of memories, the hippocampus. And the London black cab drivers, for those of you who don't know, before they can get a license, have to master something called the knowledge. And that includes memorizing the names and locations and intersections of 25,000 streets in London. Now, if you've ever seen the streets in London, they're not laid out in this orderly grid. And memorizing those 25,000 locations, plus they have to memorize 20 1,000 points of interest, their location, their address, their hours, what kind of food they serve, what kind of people are going to like it, all of that. And it generally takes about 3 years of constant study before they take the test, call the knowledge, and when they get past this test, it's considered one of the most difficult tests in the world. And at the end, compared to people the same age and same educational level, same intelligence, they have more gray matter in that part of their brain. And they know London inside and out, intuitively. But the question comes, if you think about it, as the world's been changing recently, and we now carry phones in our pockets that have GPS in there, and it's easy to find directions, are they becoming obsolete? So that question was attempted to be answered last year in a race, about 1 year ago in 2013. It was heralded all over London. They took a typical civilian with a GPS unit, and they took a famed London black cabbie and set them off against each other on a course across London during rush hour. Now, we live at a time where races are often won or lost by very small amounts, a tenth of a second, a hundredth of a second in the Olympics. Well, it turned out, as they went across London, the headlines blare that the London black cab drivers are still better than GPS. They won easily by almost an eternity. They won by, there was enough time when the London black cab driver got to the destination, got out of the cab, could have a cup of coffee waiting for this poor guy to make it across town. But what the headline should have been, these are all the tweets going off, this is great. What the headline should have been was a civilian without all that training was able to make it across town in only 3.5 minutes longer. That's astonishing, the change. And the reality is it won't be long before any of us are faster across London. Now, of course, they have knowledge. If you say, I want to go to this restaurant or this hotel, but you can get that on your phone too. All of that is going to be available to us, all of us, without that kind of training. Now, I went to medical school, trained really hard, and I have not been tested, but I am sure the gray matter in my brain changed significantly as I was learning diseases and seeing patients and really getting this knowledge that's so powerful, it's more complex, it's longer training. But the world is changing. A friend of mine, I'll tell you, if there is a child who is 5 years old today, it's likely they will never need a driver's license because cars will be driverless cars that get there, not much less having the driver have the knowledge. When I started in medical school, doctors were the central repositories of information. We had information and other people didn't. You couldn't jump on the web. You couldn't go to a medical library and visit it because patients weren't allowed. And one of the main reasons people went to doctors was to be able to learn about different conditions. And the word doctor means to teach. But that's changed. Just in the time since I've been in practice. Now people are on their the device in their hands when a question comes up and go there well before talking to the physician and have the world's medical literature, much of it, available at their fingertips. We're not any longer the guardians of knowledge. What we do is we diagnose and we treat. Well, what I want to talk about a little bit tonight is that diagnosis is about to disappear too, as something that is the province of physicians. In fact, I would say that if a child is 5 years old today, that by the time he or she's an adult, they will not need to ever get a diagnosis from a doctor. I've never said that to anybody else. I'm saying it to you because you're learning design, and this is an important design question. But let me tell you why I think that. First of all, as doctors, we don't do diagnosis as well as we'd like. There was the latest analysis of that came in BMJ Safety and Quality last week, April 17th. And what they found was that in the outpatient setting, that about 1 in 20 Americans have a misdiagnosis every year. And every year you have about a 1 in 20 shot of having a misdiagnosis. And they found, and about half of those caused harm. And they only found the misdiagnosis because in the medical record afterwards, there was evidence of it. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who got a misdiagnosis, went someplace outside the system and got fixed or didn't get fixed. It was never picked up. So 1 in 20 is a very conservative estimate. We do better than ever, but still not great. And we're improving all the time. But IBM Watson. IBM Watson, a few years ago, won Jeopardy against the smartest Jeopardy player in the world. And what's not so impressive to me is that a computer could win a trivia test. That's trivial. But the Jeopardy in particular is wordplay and questions and puns, kind of like interviewing a patient sometimes. And it was based, Watson's database that was being used was incomplete and contradictory. But using incomplete and contradictory database and tricky questions and wordplay just clean the clocks of the humans. Well, imagine if Watson turned to diagnosis. And that's exactly what's happening. So after Jeopardy, Watson effectively went to medical school. Watson has read, quote unquote, read dozens of textbooks. Watson has also now already read every citation in PubMed and Medline, millions of pages of texts, 25,000 case studies for instruction, and has had 14,700 hours of clinician time fine-tuning Watson's results, human experience, going in and saying, no, it's not quite like that, it's this way. Incredibly, we play a big part in this. And I would say that within the blink of an eye, Watson will be better at diagnostics than any human, if not already. If not already. Because Watson is accurate, Watson is available or will be, there's low marginal cost, incredibly expensive to build, and the first deployment is going to be very expensive for people, but pretty soon it's going to be cheap. It doesn't cost any extra to run another instance of the program. And Watson will be available and will be consistent. Won't have been up all night operating. Won't be having a bad day. Doesn't go through a divorce or whatever. Watson will be consistent and available and inexpensive and accurate and reliable. And a 5-year-old child today won't need to go to a doctor to learn their diagnosis by the time they're an adult. So, design is a process for creating solutions that work on multiple levels. You'll find lots of definitions of design. That's mine. Design is a process for creating solutions that work on multiple levels. And the reason that good design is so satisfying, when you know it when you see it, is that good design fits. It works for the user in more than one dimension. It's something that they like, and it's beautiful to them, and it works for them, and it's convenient, or whatever the different needs are. It's what they want and need put together for the user. All good design is user-centered design, which means all good health design must make the patient's experience paramount. And if you look at our system, that's not the way it was designed. Even when it looks good, the corridors you were talking about and the colors that were there, even when it looks nice and it's elegant and efficient, Jamia really nailed it. It's not patient-centered. It's not the patient's experience is not paramount. We miss it. We just don't think about it, partly because they're not involved in the process of designing a system and designing the experience. And we'll talk in a minute, but participatory design is the best design. Now, you're going to learn over this course a lot of different steps or frameworks for how to do design. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But I do want to, one way of looking at it is the IDEO way, where you start with inspiration, or finding the problem that you want to solve. Then you go to ideation, generating a whole bunch of out-of-the-box ideas with fresh ways of looking at it, forgetting the status quo. Let's just reimagine this, as you were saying, let's reboot. And then implementation, or for me, actually iteration, trying, changing to design by doing. And however you frame it, I believe that as doctors, it used to be we were repositories of knowledge. Right now, we're the diagnosticians. but that's going to be used to be the diagnosticians. We will be designers and other things. But at our core, we will be designers. And that's why I think this is an essential pioneering course. Thank you, Larry, for all of us. And I think that's true in clinical encounters. I think it's true in designing spaces and systems and experiences. And I think it's true in designing tools to change public health, designing campaigns to change public health. So just imagine a typical office clinical experience. Usually, how could that be a design experience, a design thinking? Well, it starts off with this thing, it's actually kind of tailored for it. It starts off with something called the chief complaint. Somebody comes in and you find the reason that they came. That's the problem that you want to solve. That's that you start all design thinking with, what problem do we want to solve? I object a little bit to the name chief complaint because most patients don't like being told that they're complainers. I'd rather call it the opportunity. This is the thing the person has come to us to want to help them with, and it's our opportunity to be of service and to connect and to perhaps change health habits. But whatever, the opportunity is laid out right in front of you at the beginning of the visit, which is great. I would say go a step deeper than that, though. Good designers usually do this. I'll tell you a little bit later how I learned it, but there's something I call the question behind the question. When somebody asks me a question as a physician, I try to think, okay, I want to answer that, but what prompted that? What's their real concern, their real fear, the other dimensions behind that? So if a mom comes in and says, I found this lump on my kid, rather than just talking about the lump, I think she's scared that her child has cancer. And I address the fear and the emotional thing and her diligence, as well as talk about lymph nodes. And so identifying the problem you want to solve is great. And that's the start of any clinical encounter. Then the next thing is ideation, or generating ideas, and sometimes out-of-the-box ideas. And I actually do, with my patients, give them some quite different responses to things. But even simple stuff, like an ear infection. Somebody comes in and it's a borderline ear infection. It's right on the cusp of the guidelines. I say, I could treat you with antibiotics, or we could wait I could write you a prescription, or you could wait 48 hours and see how this goes and maybe avoid the unnecessary antibiotics. And then I always ask, what are your thoughts? I want to involve them in generating the ideas for how we're going to solve the problem. And sometimes they'll just select one of the things I mentioned, but often they will propose something slightly different that really fits for them, because this is user-centered design. And they'll say, how about you give me the prescription now, but I won't take it yet, but I don't want to have to come back in or call you again later, and we'll let you know, or something like that. And I've had all kinds of things that have happened that in my clinical practice. It's amazing. I start by asking thoughts from patients about how to make the experience better. So, and then iteration was the last piece. And with acute otitis media, what needs to happen is closing the loop after the clinical encounter. What worked, what didn't work, do we need to change antibiotics? Really, if you start somebody on antibiotics for an ear infection and it's not better within 48 to 72 hours, you should switch. But that often doesn't happen because nobody ever follows up to see if they need to iterate or not. We lose people to follow up because it's such a hassle to get in. So clinical encounters. Got to say something else though. If we're talking about patient experience designing the clinical encounter, the patient experience does not begin when the doctor walks in the room. The patient experience begins way before that. So designing for health means designing waiting rooms and talking to the patients. They hate bringing kids in with other sick kids into a waiting room and sitting around and waiting for me to catch up. So my office, while it does have a waiting room, the waiting room is never for patients. It's not for patients. We schedule in such a way that patients always go straight in to be seen, with one exception I'll talk about in a minute. The waiting room is only for family members that aren't going to go into the exam room, but that came along on the trip. So it's an entirely different waiting room. It's comfortable and the kind of place you'd like to be, like a little living room, rather than like a doctor's office. Now, it does happen, even with my proactive scheduling, I get backed up. I did today. I ended up being late to one of my patients a little bit. But because this was patient-centered, rather than them waiting for me, we arranged in our office to have a nurse practitioner and a lactation consultant sit with them, and make that useful time where they gained even more from the experience than they would have if I'd been there on time. And it was working so well when I got there, I actually waited for them half an hour while I was writing this talk. So it all worked out. But designing the clinical experience, the whole thing, we think about from the patient's point of view and as design. Now, one of the things that came up doing this in my early years in practice was I was in practice up in San Mateo at the time, and it was during the managed care experiment era. And what happened was I went from seeing 3 families an hour, which was way too many, to have to see 4 an hour, and then 5, and then 6, and then 7, and then 8 as this managed care experiment came rolling out, and the patients hated it. So I talked to some of my colleagues in the area and said, why don't we got to do something. I'm exhausted, the patients are unhappy, they say, we love you, but we can't get our questions answered. And my colleagues said, you cannot ask the patients about this, because if you do, they'll realize there's a problem. And if you do, anything they come up with will be unrealistic. But being young and just out of medical school and not willing to, I don't know, so it was kind of crazy. I started holding meetings with the families and saying, I'm exhausted, you're exhausted, what can we come up with? Let's just brainstorm this thing and see what kinds of solutions we can come up with to solve our problem together. Put anything on the table. We could do group visits, we could, whatever you want to do. And the thing that emerged from that was the idea of having a website for the practice. But this was in '95, before Google or Amazon, or it was before Internet Explorer, before Microsoft had a browser. And it was, as far as we know, the first physician with a website in the world. And actually, Cheryl, my wife, who's here, built the website. I did the content. And we decided that what we would do is we would answer questions, 1 question a night, in depth, so they could learn, not just me write a quick prescription for otitis media, but learn what causes it, what prevents it, how do you deal with this antibiotic and bigger issues. And it proved immensely successful. It was because it wasn't much like it, and you couldn't get information online. We've now had over 80 million visitors on this, unique visitors, on this unadvertised website that's just a public service. And at first, it was people coming from India and saying, we heard there's a doctor on the internet. We've walked 3 days from a village. Could you please answer our question? But now, this information, there's lots of it everywhere. But we started trying to solve a problem. We involved people in solving the problem. By nature, the best design for health is participatory. And then we brainstormed, and then we have iterated so many times. There have been so many versions of the site. I went to school, took a cue from Princeton University, where I went, where if you talk about Princeton, one of the first things I hear from people is, what a beautiful campus, which is true. But the way they have designed the campus is they thought, where are the ideal places to put the footpaths in between for the best views and the best access, and so the whole thing looks right, and they've done that. But they also notice wherever people actually walk and build a path there too. So it's very user-involved design, and it makes for this that satisfying feeling of beauty, and it works for people. And it's in places they would never have predicted. So when I walked in this room, I saw the "Do Not Sit on Tables" sign, and I thought, that's because people probably keep trying to sit on the tables, and they would like to sit on the tables. So maybe we could figure out a way to design around that problem. And it's probably because there's wheels on here, and they were afraid that somebody will slip, or somebody did slip. But when the people want to do something, but we say it can't happen, that's a design opportunity. That's the moment to look for, because finding the problems that you really want to focus on is often the hardest part. I got way behind on my slides. That was the first Dr. Green's house calls. I've even gone through several iterations since then. The next thing I want to talk about, not quite yet on this piece, I'll leave the last one up, is Larry alluded to, I've been doing work with a company called Scanadu. And we're in the process of trying to, at drgreen.com, the goal was to take all health information and put it in the hands of people. In fact, one of the first things I wrote was about the Hippocratic Oath, and how the key message in the Hippocratic Oath is for doctors to keep knowledge of medicine secret. We were going to hold on to this stuff. And so I set out to break that part of the Hippocratic Oath every day, to try to get as much information in the hands of people as possible. And that's out there. People have got it. But the one place it's still missing in a big way is people don't have access to information yet about their own bodies. That's still stuck in laboratories and in medical records. You can't do diagnostic things. So I joined up with a guy named Walter DeBrouwer and his wife Sam DeBrouwer and a great team, and started trying to reimagine what that would look like. And we did this with IDEO. We met with a lot of families, with adults and kids, and listened to them and brainstormed around this problem, went through that basic idea. And here is the video that we came up with based on what people wanted.
Technology has given us an unprecedented window into the human body. But on a day-to-day basis, we're still in the dark about our own health. We are changing that.
You okay? Do you feel okay?
What if instead of fearing the worst when you notice something out of the ordinary, you could identify the condition yourself? Getting the right diagnosis would save you worry
It says it's roseola.
and an unnecessary doctor's visit.
Rest at home. It's okay.
Instead of hearing about a viral outbreak on the news, imagine you got an alert that was tailored to your family's needs. It would also give you advice about what to do next. What if you had a way to identify what was wrong right away?
It says it's 103.8.
A way to get all of the information you need to understand the situation. And in serious cases, you would know when and where to seek help.
Yeah, it recommends taking it to the urgent care.
We're building a way for people to check their bodies as often as they check their email. It's all possible, and it's only the beginning.
So it's going to be years before we have all that implemented, although the urinalysis at home piece is very close, will likely come out this year. And the very first piece I want to bring along and show you, this is called the Scanadu Scout, and it's a little device for measuring vital signs. It's pretty cool. You can tell it's designed. It doesn't look like a medical device. It looks like a cool thing. And you just touch it to your forehead for 8 to 10 seconds, and it gives you all the information you would get at the start of a medical conversation. Your temperature, your heart rate variability, respiratory rate. It does actually a single lead EKG. It measures your blood oxygen level, and it gives you your blood pressure without a cuff. So it's pretty cool. And this happened and we were talking before how blood pressure is one of the biggest, is probably the biggest underlying cause of death on the planet, and how tracking can make a big difference. And this would make it really easy for people to do wherever they are. One of our mottos at Scanadu, we have a bunch, but there's a movie, a baseball movie, if you build it, they will come. But our motto is, if they come, we will build it. And so what we did is we decided to go out and gather people who are interested in this, to brainstorm together, to work together, to contribute together to make this possible. So we did a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo, and put it out there to people. Would you like to help this? Would you like to contribute, be part of a usability study? Let us know what design features you want. We want really you to be involved in designing it. And it turned out to set the world's record for Indiegogo campaigns. People who are interested in health. Our investors said that nobody's going to want a device that will measure vital signs. But people said they did. People wanted that access and that data and the analytics and everything deeper than that. So we're in the process. This should be shipping next month to those folks that were in the campaign, and will be going through an FDA usability study, and then available to the public after that. So design thinking works best in times of rapid change, because it's about breaking things open, about new ways of doing it. And we have never, as a human race, experienced such a time of rapid change as right now. You know, the iPad, which feels like it's been around forever now, was just launched 4 years ago this month. There are people who are residents now that it didn't exist when they started medical school. Imagine, well, with Moore's law or whatever pace different technologies are going, some things are going faster than that genetics certainly is. In the people who start medical school today and finish their training 7 years from now, what this world's going to be like, seeing a doubling or quadrupling or beyond of capabilities. Change is happening. So the time has never been riper, nor has it ever been more important to pursue design thinking. So think of yourself, if you're a doctor, as a designer. Thank you very much.
All right, well, now we're going to kind of turn this discussion over to you all here, as well as those of us that are out in the Twitterverse. So quickly, I want to just got my little handy mobile device and kind of check in and see what's going on out there. So I want to do a couple of shout outs to @MarcyMom in Singapore. We've got Josh Harrigan from Kansas City, Susanna Fox, Catherine Blotner from Arizona, @Life-Court from Baltimore. Also, we've got a few other questions coming on, but I want to kind of turn to you all first. And Dr. Green and I will kind of do some discussion with you all here, and then we'll kind of pop in and see what's going on in Twitter world.
And I actually need to take a quick patient call. It's an urgent call, and patients always come first. Sorry.
All right. Well, while he does his great doctor work, we'll just turn it over to you all. Any questions, feedback to what you've heard tonight? Don't be shy. Yes, in the back.
Thanks. You mentioned earlier that your whole left side, you couldn't walk, and I'm wondering what was your journey like getting to the point where you walked in here and did all that. So
It's very interesting. I was in so much denial. With MS, sometimes I would get symptoms that would pop up and go away. So one time I woke up and I was numb on my whole right side, and I was like, that's weird, but who doesn't get numb from time to time? So, and then it went away. So I just figured I slept on it wrong. And then another time it was like my foot dropped. And I just felt like I was stepping and flapping in the grocery store. And I was like, oh my gosh. And my husband was like, oh my gosh, you have on your flat shoes. You're not used to walking without your little tiptoe heels. So that was another presentation that MS flared up, and then it went away. So when I realized I couldn't walk, I just figured I'd walk it off. Like the whole left leg was just going to just get back on track. And it wasn't until I fell that I realized, okay, maybe this is serious now. And then people thought I had a stroke. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 27 years old, I've had a stroke. So then that's kind of how the diagnosis process started. So it was kind of a collection of things that kind of built up to this story of having MS. And then I got right on antibiotic therapy and steroid treatment to subdue the exacerbation. And then I was fortunate that I regained, what you see here today. There's some nuances that come up from time to time, but that's just the magic of managing MS. Some days it's a good day, some days it's not. So today, good day, right? Check that off, but tomorrow could be something different. So that's kind of the fun with it. But yeah, the whole left leg, I literally dragged my leg around for 2 weeks thinking that any minute now, my leg was just going to pop right back on track. And everyone was kind of looking at me like, Jamia, what's wrong with your leg? And I'm like, it's great, I'm fine, good. See you guys in that meeting. So it was definitely kind of a journey, even within that diagnosis phase, that I was very much not connected with the patient experience or patient design. I was still focused on career, so yeah. Yes, ma'am.
As you transitioned from the more administrative side to the patient role, was there anything that really surprised you and that you just had not seen from the other side?
I think it was, for me, I'm very visual, and I'm a very color-oriented and texture, and so for me, I was very surprised at how, we had these colors of tranquility, and I was like, I'm not feeling tranquil at all. I'm nervous about what this MRI scan is going to be. I'm kind of nervous and scared in these glossy floors. This is a tripping, falling hazard. It's too slick. And it was just amazing how some of the things that we thought as administrators was a great experience and a great atmosphere. From a patient perspective, it wasn't really so much. And so when I kind of got back on my feet, I kind of started asking some questions with the execs like, hey, has anyone really looked at the colors of the wall lately? Do we think we need to refresh that? And they're just like, oh, Miss Fashion Queen wanted to redesign the hospital. I'm kind of like, kind of, yeah. Can we kind of look at the interior design of the waiting area and these weird chairs that aren't comfortable to sit in? And so I kind of started chipping away a little bit. And over time, there were some minor changes, but it was interesting to not have seen that before. And I don't think I would have seen it had I not been a patient in that hospital where I was working. Yeah. Yes.
So I think a lot of times, like, the current thought of the day is that, doctors go through years and years of training and have a greater knowledge in order to help patients. And a lot of times there are frustrations that with the internet, patients come in already sort of self-diagnosing without really having all the information. How do you address those sort of thoughts, but at the same time really try to consider the patient's perspective as well?
That's an excellent question. So I've found that for me, the more knowledge that my patients have, the better relationship we have. And so by sort of being okay with them learning, they tend to trust me. The reason they come to me is to know what I think. And so we work together in this conversation and come up with responsibilities. I think the problem is when people have sort of incomplete knowledge. They read a bad website, or they are not looking as widely as they should. And so part of what I do is talk about how do you decide which websites are good, and how do you read both sides of a story, and let's talk about what you found. The other thing I should say, it's been mentioned a few times, the Society for Participatory Medicine is a really cool organization. It's for patients and physicians and other healthcare providers and organizations. Scanadu is part of the society. And it's a group of people that are all wrestling together with best practices for how to do this collaboratively in a way that really works from all the different sides. But I love being a doctor, and I think it's going to get better and better as the years go by and we have more tools. I'm not at all doom and gloom, but it's not going to be the same as it is now.
Yeah. And we'll take one more question here, and then we'll turn to our Twitter folks.
One thing I've noticed with a lot of inpatients is the relationship that they have with nurses, and comparing that to the relationship they have with doctors. And sometimes there seems to be this where they have a much closer relationship with their nurses because their nurses are much more, on hand, like much more accessible than physicians in a lot of ways. So how would you suggest like bringing nurses into this design thinking process and having nurses be designers as well?
I think that's absolutely fabulous. That it should be a team approach, and that again is specifically what Participatory Medicine Society is about. It's nurses and a lot of other health professionals. And the decision today, I'm running late, how are we going to make this a positive thing for the patient, was out of a conversation with the nurse and I trying to figure out what do we do. So I think they are often way closer to the patient perspective than physicians are. And if designing for the patient experience is central, then you've got to involve nurses.
Okay, well, we're going to kind of go out into Twitterverse, and there's a couple of great questions. I guess people are really engaged out there. We've got tons of questions coming in, and I'll start with one from Amy Campbell, who has a question about, with Watson going to med school, how will non-doctor diagnosis be verified as accurate?
So how will doctor diagnosis be verified accurate? But but
Thank you.
I'm not saying that doctors don't have an important role to play in all this. We have context and experience. I would rather, if I'm in London, to have a London cab driver who does know the pulse of the city and GPS, not either or. So I think that's a big piece of it. Also, there's specific tests, like the urinalysis that people are that Scanadu is putting out, it's going through the FDA, is something that it's as higher or higher quality than in many doctors' offices or hospitals, and they'll get the information, but still want to collaborate with somebody to know what to do about that information.
Right. Excellent. And another question out there from Alan Brewington says, will easy access to diagnostic capabilities create a nation of hypochondriacs? What do y'all feel about that? Everyone's going to be scanning and coming up with their own diagnosis on everything, but I think that's an interesting point. What do we say about that? How do we feel about that?
Well, in that video, it says they'll check your body as often as you check your email. The average American checks their phone 150 times a day. So it's a lot.
That's a lot.
We don't need to see information about our health that much, but to have a dashboard that boils down the key information, so if something is out of range, you're alerted to it. Your car has diagnostics all the time. You know when the engine oil light comes on, check oil, or the tires are low in my car. And to have that kind of information about you, to pay attention to something. Some of those warning lights don't mean anything, but some should be checked.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And we'll take one more question from the Twitter world, and then we'll come back to the classroom. So this is from Annette McKinnon. When will the Scanadu Scout be available to non-backers? That's the question of the hour, because I think I would love to get one of those scans just to see how that works.
Yeah, we don't know exactly. It depends on it, but I'm guessing in the fall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because
Soon.
there's two pieces of that. There's the usability study with all this original group, and then which is one of the biggest usability studies ever done, because so many people. And then it goes through the FDA submission. And last year those averaged, they say it averages 90 days, but last year's averaged 120 days.
Excellent. And there'll be different colors to match with the outfits. As I would like to have one to coordinate, so I'm all coordinated there. So that's great. Any other questions out from the class? Yes, sir.
On your video, you showed a couple with a little boy they were sort of reassured that all was well and he didn't need to go to hospital. Are there not cases where maybe it potentially could be dangerous when they'd be falsely reassured, and perhaps it would have been better for a few of the worried well to go to hospital, but for at least, safer for that odd child that may be misdiagnosed by a machine?
Yeah, and my take from scanner, Watson is planning on diagnosis. And we are planning on giving information to people about their bodies. So what our goal is actually not like the video said, that was just before I arrived at Scanadu, is to say, you have roseola, stay home. But instead say, so if they do, we have this little mobile fluidics thing where you can spit into it and at home find out if you have influenza A, influenza B, strep throat, adenovirus, RSV, and all within 2 minutes at home and for less than the cost of a parking space at much less a copay. But what we're not going to say you have strep throat or you don't have strep throat or influenza A or influenza B. We'll say that this virus was detected, this virus was not detected. It doesn't mean you're sick. You might be a carrier. You might, and we'll explain to people that even if all your tests are negative, you still likely could have a respiratory infection. We're just going to measure data from people's bodies and give it to them. That's our goal.
Hi. So I had one of my instinctual reactions to seeing that technology at home is the concern over, sometimes requesting things that a person at home may not be able to do. Like sometimes when a symptom presents, there's an immediate thing you need to check. If there's an abdominal pain, you might wonder, do they have an abdominal aortic aneurysm?
Right.
And that's really hard to do unless you have a medical training.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where it almost concerns me that people might be encouraged to stay home and use the machine when really there's some things where you really need to go to the hospital with that concern.
And I also agree with that. I think emergency medical care will always be needed and is something that will get better over time. So the goal is not to keep people with urgent situations out of the system, but it's to empower people outside to take better care of themselves, to learn about their body, and to be aware when they really should go in quick to the ER.
And we'll take a question out from Sherry Reynolds. I'm kind of a touchy-feely kind of person, so I really think this is going to be a very interesting question to hear. Much of healthcare is based on a trusted relationship. How can technology enhance those relationships?
Well, I find that right now, with the families that I work with, they can't always be in the office, right? It's inconvenient. There's just not enough time for that to work. But we can be in touch throughout the course of the week because of technology. We can, through video or messaging or email or all kinds of different ways, it can deeply enhance relationship. And if they happen to have at home like a cell scope to look in the ear or a live core EKG or the scanner device, and they call up at night with a fever, and we talk, we can have the data, what the kid's heart rate is and respiratory rate and all that to talk about and make a decision together.
Excellent. I see a hand. Yes. Of course you can.
But,
Question on.
how would you propose increasing accessibility of these kinds of devices across socioeconomic and ethnic barriers?
Thank you for that.
It was, very good question. How do we get this across socioeconomic boundaries? I think that in some ways the best applications of these are in situations where there's the greatest need. So I would love to see devices like this in every village. There's usually somebody who takes care of the health for the village, and for them to have this kind of capability, just one for the group, would be fantastic. Often the safety and health innovations that start in one strata, like Mercedes invented the airbag. I believe it was Mercedes, and it was just the luxury car, just the elite had that protection, and now it's in every car. And I think sensors are becoming so inexpensive and data is becoming so inexpensive that soon it'll be really ubiquitous. And already this is a big price drop from where it has been in the past.
We've got a question there, and then we'll go to you next, Max.
Hi. I'm wondering, given that your background is in medicine, how did you put together a team and translate your idea into an actual product? Like, what were the challenges you faced, and how did you overcome some of those main challenges?
Team was the important word in your question, because my training is strictly in medicine. It's the core of who I am. I act like a physician in everything that I do. But in order to get that from creating a product, we've got mathematicians and electrical engineers and mechanical engineers and business people and designers, 2 different design firms. So it was figuring out what is not working. And it's partly because we have failed so many times that we learn each time. I think this is iteration 17 of the Scout. We've made a lot of models and tried things.
I think we have a question here with Max.
Hi, so my question today is about how do you feel about current FDA regulations regarding medical devices? For instance, 23andMe recently ran into a bunch of problems because it felt that the FDA felt that the information they were giving was of a diagnostic nature. Do you guys have issues with similar issues to that? And also, do you feel that those FDA regulations are like an inherent constraint of this design space, or do you think it's something that's a little bit outdated with the current digital age that will eventually change?
It's a very good question. The people, when we were started at the beginning of Scan and Do, there was a lot of pressure from all of the people in the business world and the investor side to stay away from the FDA because it's just going to be a mess and it's going to slow you down. And I pushed hard for actually going through the FDA. Let's involve them in a participatory way in what we're doing. Let's talk to them. Let's tell them what's up. And because this is a design challenge. We have an FDA that was designed for the 20th century, and we're not in the 20th century. We want to protect people. We want things that have accuracy and standards behind them, but we don't want to stifle innovation. So how can we work in a way where we get stuff into people's hands, but at the same time ensure accuracy and it all works? So it's not a problem that's solved, but I think our solution of doing this in the crowd-funded way that nobody had done before, and getting it into the hands of people who understand that it's an investigational unit and they're signing this informed consent that is not FDA approved yet. We're part of the study to see what works and what doesn't. Lets them have at it, be part of the process, and the FDA can be happy because we are looking to them for oversight.
I think we've got time for one more question.
So integration is one of the bigger issues in healthcare. So I'm very interested when you have like a lot of proprietary vendors that do clinical systems, how are you sort of imagining the future of being able to integrate sort of devices like yours and information that comes from them with like pre-existing medical records and stuff on the clinical side?
So we start with a different data strategy than pretty much every company that I'm aware of. And our data strategy is that the data belongs to the patient entirely. It's theirs. And so it resides in their device, on their phone, it's theirs. But we also make it possible to share and easy to share and exportable in a lot of different formats. They could send a touch of a button to their physician or to a Minute Clinic or to their hospital, and it's designed to be easily portable, but it's theirs to do what they want with. One thing that we will encourage, though, is people to do anonymous or, if they want, named data sharing to the cloud. And the people who do that will then have access to that same shared data pool, and they can look at maps, and you can see how something in the news affects people's blood pressure, or affects women's blood pressure, or affects the blood pressure in the South. Or, I mean, let people run all their own experiments on stuff if they want to get involved in that shared data pool. We learn together.
All right, well, I think we are at time as far as our discussion portion of today. I do want to give some shout outs to Dr. Greg Widener in Charlotte, also Nick Dawson in Virginia, and Judy Warrior in Indiana. So thank you all out in Twitter world. Thank you all for being here and sharing this space with us. I hope you found this to be enjoyable and also learning, and I hope we've kind of shifted your mindset to the next level of designing healthcare for the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight for this edition of Stanford Medicine X Live. We'll see you back here on April 29th, 2014 at 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we'll discuss the topic, Doctors Who Skip Out on Social Media Risk Alienating Patients, Myth or Reality? Moderated by Britt Johnson with a panel of patients and doctors. You won't want to miss the next episode of Stanford Medicine X Live. As a quick reminder, this program is made possible by support from the Stanford University School of Medicine, Department of Anesthesia, Stanford AIM Lab, Stanford Hospital and Clinics, and the Agency for Healthcare Research Quality. If you haven't yet done so, please take a moment to like our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/StanfordMedX so you can continue the conversation online and stay informed of program updates. From all of us here at Stanford Medicine X Live, we want to thank you for joining us today and remind you to join us again next Thursday, May 1st at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another edition of Stanford Medicine X Live featuring a new healthcare design class from the Stanford University School of Medicine called Design for Health. Next week, we are featuring a class on co-design with patients, bringing users into the process with Nick Dawson and e-patient Katie McCurdy. Online activities are a great way for those of you in our class or at home to participate and join in the online conversation around design for health. Don't forget to follow us on Tumblr and participate in this week's online activity. Storytelling. We want you to describe the innovation you prototyped last week and how the person for whom you innovated responded to that prototype. Don't be scared to report failures. You may use video, audio, or text to share your work. Post it on Tumblr with the MedX hashtag or submit a post through our Tumblr website, and we'll make sure to include it on our class website. Also, please don't forget that registration for Stanford Medicine X 2014 is now open. Don't miss the year's premier patient-centered conference on emerging technology and medicine. Unique opportunities such as our masterclass program and our IDEO Design Challenge workshop have extremely limited space availability. You'll want to take advantage of these programs while our early bird registration pricing is still available until May 1st, 2014. For all of you out there taking time to tune in with us tonight, thank you for joining us and being part of the conversation. A special thanks to our speakers this evening. From all of us at Stanford Medicine X Live, we'll see you next time.